Very good Erev Shabbat. This week's Parsha, Chayei Sarah, we read of the passing of Avraham Avinu, our father Avraham. And the Torah records for us that Avraham is buried next to his wife Sarah in the Marat HaMachpelah, and that his burial was attended by Yitzchak and Yishmael, his two sons. Now, Avraham had many children. We read in the Parsha of the Bnei Keturah, out of which many tribes and nations grew. So Avraham had many sons, but the Torah mentions Yitzchak and Yishmael. So the rabbis looked at it and said, what do we see from the fact that Yishmael came to the funeral? And why is that important for us? Why does the Torah mention it? So the rabbi said, because in the Torah it says, Yitzchak v'Yishmael. It says Yitzchak first. So from there we can deduce, the rabbis say, that Yishmael recognized that Yitzchak was the primary son, that he was not going to contest the inheritance, so to speak, and that he realized that Yitzchak is the heir of Avraham. He is a child, but he, because in the previous Parsha, according to Midrash, he contested it with Yitzchak. He said, I'm older, and I'm the one that should be the heir, so to speak. Now, we all know that inheritance is a difficult parsha. And no matter how careful we are, or how fair we think we are, there are a lot of things that go into it that are much more than the item itself. In other words, when a family argues about wealth that's left to them by a father, they're not really arguing about the wealth. They're arguing about deep down sensitivities that exist within them that reflect itself in how much they're going to get. Who's the primary child? And that's a very, very difficult test in life. The rabbis, therefore, had two solutions to it. One solution is to give the money while alive, because then it's still your money. You can do whatever you want with it. And the second solution was not to leave anything. Which is if you think about it, it's an enormously wise solution. A person that dies without leaving wealth, his family will not argue. The catalyst for the argument is not there. However, our psychology is that we not only want to leave money and secure the finances of our children, but even of our grandchildren and even of our great-grandchildren. And therefore, that always leads to problems. So the rabbi said, Yishmael now, when he comes to bury his father Avraham, he lets Yitzchak go first. He gives Yitzchak the primacy of honor and of place. Yitzchak is the real son. So the rabbis deduce from that to a great extent we have to say that Ishmael is a Baal Tshuva. He has repented from his previous deeds. So Ishmael is a positive person because if the Lord is willing to forgive him, then we have to forgive him too. And we have to overlook the fact that the Torah itself describes him as Pere Odom, a wild man. Yoda Bakol, he's fighting with everybody. Yad Kol Bo, and everybody fights with him. At the end, the rabbis say, so he has 3 stages in life, Yishmael, that the rabbis record for us. The first stage in life is that he's a good boy. It says, Vayishma Elohim el kol hanar b'asher hu sham. The Lord heard the cry of Ishmael when he was cast away in the desert without water. So it says the Lord heard his cry, b'asher hu sham, in that place as he was then. So the Medrash says, the angels in heaven said, let's not save him because he's going to be a terrible person. He's going to be violent. He'll make war. He'll let him die in the desert. And God, so to speak, answers Basher Husham. What is he now? I don't know what's going to be later. What is he now? Now he's innocent. He didn't do anything to anybody. Therefore, he's entitled to be saved. This goes to the heart of the philosophical conundrum. Whether a pediatrician, for instance, that took care of Adolf Hitler, or of Joseph Stalin, or of Mao Zedong, or any of the other holy people. He could have killed him. If you had killed him, who knows, maybe tens of millions of lives would have been spared. We would have a much better world. But then he was a child. Excuse me. And when he was a child, how can you kill a child? So there's a philosophical issue of, so to speak, the preemptive strike. What to do? We have that all over in education. You have many times that a teacher or a principal is well aware that this student is pathologically ill. He's going to be a terrible person. So what is your responsibility? So that's a lecture you didn't pay for, and I'm not going to give it to you, but Yishmael is the perfect example. Basher Husham, right now, he's a child. He hasn't done anything wrong. So God says, you're not allowed to kill him. So that's the first stage of Yishmael. The second stage of Yishmael, which Medrash teaches us, is then when Yitzchak comes along. So there always is the nature of people. There always is what we call sibling rivalry. So like the first child that's born, so that child is the center of the family. Everything revolves about him or her. And then all of a sudden, here comes another child. So the human reaction to that is certainly negative. The reaction is to resent the second child because it's taking away from me. So I remember when we had 2 children, and then my wife told them that she was expecting now they would have another, turned out a sister. So the second child said to her, I'm sorry, the first child said to her, but we didn't use this one up yet. So that's the true expression of how people feel. So when Yitzchak shows up, okay, thank you. When Yitzchak shows up, so Yishmael resents it. Not only does he resent it, his personality brings him to threats of violence. It says that Sarah saw that Yishmael mitzachek, he mocks Yitzchak. So there are many interpretations to that. But one of the interpretations is that he's shooting arrows at him and barely missing him. Because mitzachek, many times in biblical context, means to kill, to murder. Like it says by David HaMelech, Yischaku Anorim Lefonenu, that there was going to be a duel. So Yitzchak's life is in danger. Not only that, Yishmael says to him, you know, you're a big deal. You had a milah when you were 8 days old. You couldn't say no. You didn't know anything about it. And I had the milah when I was 13. When I was an adult almost. So you think you're holier than I am? I'm entitled to everything. So that's the second stage of Yishmael. That's the stage that the Torah describes. Yodo bakol viad kol bo. Now Yishmael goes out in the world and builds an empire for himself. He becomes a warlike chieftain. He takes over countries. He's feared in the world. And now the rabbis describe the third stage in Yishmael. That somehow Yishmael becomes a Baal Tshuva. He repents. He recognizes Yitzchak as the true heir of Avraham Avinu, and that now he adopts the ways of Avraham. Hospitality, welcoming to strangers, proclaiming monotheism. So you have here a diverse personality. So that's why you will notice that never is he called in Jewish tradition Yishmael HaRasha, evil Yishmael. He's never called that. Esav is called that. Esav, we say, is Esav a Rasha. Because Esav never does tshuva. He contests to the end. When Yaakov Avinu was brought to the Marsha Machpelah to be buried, Esav comes and says, no, I'm entitled, not Yaakov. According to the Medrash, then, he is killed and his head is buried in the Marsha Machpelah, which is a very good story that tour guides will tell you. But Esav is called Esav a Rasha. Yishmael is never called a Rasha. The attitude to Yishmael is always ambivalent. It's hard to know, hard to define. If we put it in our terms today, when we have to deal with the descendants of Yishmael, so we are ambivalent. We don't know how to deal with them. How do you deal with the Arabs? So on one hand, you make the Abraham Accords, right? And we're going to be friends, and we're going to be brothers, and everything will be wonderful. And on the other hand, you're trying to kill us. We'll invade Shechem, and we'll kill you first. So to speak, which Yishmael are we dealing with? Now the Mefarshim point out, Yitzchak does not have God's name in his name. Yaakov does not have God's name in his name. The only one who has God's name in his name is Yishmael. So the rabbis point out in the Medrash that was one of the motivations that the Rabbanu Shalom said, Lo yikorei shimcha od Yaakov kim Yisrael. We're not going to call you Yaakov anymore. We have to call you Yisrael, because you have to have also God's name in your name in order to counter Yishmael. Otherwise, he's on top of you. He has the advantage. He has God's name in his name, and you don't. Chazal put a tremendous emphasis on names, which in our time doesn't exist at all. We sometimes saddle our descendants with names that, it's hard to define. But Chazal always looked at the name. So therefore, one of the questions I remember when we were in the yeshiva a long, long time ago, and we were learning, so one of the Bocharim asked the Rebbe, how come it says Omar Rebbe Yishmael? How come one of the Tanoim is named Yishmael? We say it every morning. Is Rabbi Yishmael. And there was a Rabbi Yishmael that was the Kohen Gadol. We say that on Yom Kippur in the Slichus. How do you name a Jew Yishmael? Nobody's named Esav. There's a shaila in halacha whether you should name a girl Hagar. Different opinions. Today it's popular that we have a lot of Jewish women called Hagar. So why did they call him Rabbi Yishmael? How did he get named Yishmael? Because Yishmael was not negative. Depends which Yishmael you're picking. If you want him to be an innocent child, so Yishmael's a good name. You want him to be a Baal Tshuva, Yishmael's a good name. You want to be a paraodam, that's something else. So Yishmael remains this mystery for us. And we see the descendants of Yishmael have characteristics of Avraham Avinu with them. They still have characteristics of hospitality, and certainly of monotheism. All the poskim say that there's no din of avodah zarah by the Muslims whatsoever. I mean, we see a lot of strange things in our time that only brilliant rabbis can explain to you. But like, what is the Al-Aqsa Mosque doing on the Har HaBayis? Because the Al-Aqsa Mosque is not Avodah Zarah. If there would be a Byzantine church, that's Avodah Zarah. If it's Avodah Zarah, so then halachically we have obligations to somehow do something about it. But the Al-Aqsa Mosque is not Avodah Zarah. It's monotheism. So to speak, they're protecting the monotheistic interest in the Har HaBayis until the Lord will bring us to a better state. And that's why Jewish tradition always felt that the Bnei Yishmael will guard the land and the places better than the Bnei Esav, which is certainly true. The Jews never had an easy ride anywhere. So they never had an easy ride in the Muslim countries either. But there's no comparison to Jews living under Islam, to Jews living under Christianity. That's why even today the Sephardic world views the world differently than the Ashkenazic world. Because they didn't go through those traumas. So Yishmael is hard. We can't put our finger on him. Hard to know who he is. The Gemara says an interesting thing. When the Lord told Abraham that you're going to have a child, Yitzchak, so it says that Avraham laughed. So the Gemara says he laughed out of joy, not out of derision, not out of doubt, because Avraham, it says, Vahemin b'Hashem. Avraham believed no matter what. But he laughed out of joy. And in the moment of his joy, he said, Lu Yishmael yichya lefanecha. Alavai, let Yishmael live. Lefanecha, meaning with your worship, let him also. Avraham is concerned about Yishmael. It says, Vayera hadover leAvraham odos beno. Avraham, even though God tells him to listen to Sarah and to send Yishmael away, but Avraham is troubled by it. It's against his nature. How can he do that? How could he give up on his child? So Avraham gave him a bracha. He said, Lu yichya Yishmael lefanecha. Alavai Yishmael should live for you. So Jewish tradition says that bracha remains until today. Avraham Avinu said Yishmael should live. They're not going away. Which is a remarkable thing. And that's why we're talking 3,500 years later, it's the same story. Because Avraham Avinu himself gave Yishmael the bracha. I have a wonderful story. Like all my stories, they're true. It's true. But this one really happened. So I had a member in my shul in Miami Beach. Isidore Wolf was his name. Zichrona Levrocha. He was an old Litvak. And he lived to be close to 100. He was a very, very clever man, very astute person. He had no education, not Hebrew or English. Completely self-made. He came to America when he was 15 by himself. He ended up owning parking garages in New York. He was very, very wealthy and very generous. So I used to go visit him Purim and bring him shalach monas. He had nobody. I don't know if he had children or not, but he was alone in Miami. When I saw him, he was 96, which is not old when I consider it now. And he told me once, he said, Rebbe, it is Lithuanian English, Rebbe, you want to know why I'm so old? It's a strange question. I said, Mr. Wolf, or whatever, He said, I'm going to tell you why. He said, I was 11 years old in Kovna. And my mother and father died in a cholera epidemic. And I had no one. I was 11 years old and I was living on the street. In Kovna, there was a Musar Klois. There was a group, the Balei Musar, the Talmidim of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Holy men. And he said, they took me in. They took me off the street. And they gave me a bed. And they fed me. And they taught me olive bays. And they taught me to daven. And I lived with them for 4 or 5 years. And then I ran away to America. So he said, the custom by the Musar Klois was, after Ne'ilah, after Ne'ilah by us, the question is who can daven Ma'ariv quicker. They used to dance for a half hour. The Yom HaKodesh, cleansed from sins, so they danced for a half hour. So he said, I remember the first time I was 11 years old, so I was dancing. So next to me was Rabbi Yitzchak Blaser, Rabbi Yitzchak Petterberger, who's buried here on Har HaZeisim. A great tzaddik. And he was the primary disciple of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. And he was here in the Yeshiva Yoshan with Rabbi Shmuel Salanter. So he said, I'm dancing next to him. He said, he's 75 and I'm 11, so he can't keep up with me. So I gave him a kick. So he stopped dancing, and he said to me, he said, my dear boy, lang sollst du leben. You should live a long life, but don't kick. So he said, you know why I'm so old? Because the Rebitzel of Peterburger said to me, lang sollst du leben. You should live a long life. So if Rebitzel has said it, so then it's got to be. He said, that's why I lived a long life. It made such an impression on me. So why is Yishmael Yishmael? Because Avram told them, Lul Yishmael Lefonecha. You want to know what's going on? Don't listen to Shmotrich, and don't listen to Ben Gvir, and don't listen to Tanyahu, and don't listen to... Avram Avinu said it. You're not going to win it. Deal with it. You're not going to win it. But only great rabbis see this. But that's the story of Yishmael. We, so to speak, are locked in with him. And it's not easy, because he is our brother. And the inheritance, that's the contest. Who does it belong to? Whose Moras HaMachpelah is it? Whose Harabayas is it? So when the Chumash tells us stories, it's not telling us ancient facts. It's not telling us a narrative. It's trying to give us an insight into our lives and to every situation that can arise. And therefore, that's why it's so timeless and it has such influence upon us. And every generation hears the story differently, because the circumstances are different. The situation is different. So when the Torah tells us that Yitzchak and Yishmael came together to bury Abraham, and Yishmael became a Baal Tshuva, and so the Torah is telling us something here. It's pointing away to the future. And even by Esav, even though he's Esav Arosha, so it says, Volo Moshim Bahar Tzion Lishpotas Har Esav. There'll be a judgment, but after the judgment, Voisel Hashem Amlucha. Esav is also going to be part of it somehow. And that is the supreme greatness of Torah, how it addresses all situations and all generations. And we should be zoche to see great things occur as have been foretold for us by our prophets. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for coming. Saturday night, there's the first of our lecture series. If you signed up, he sent you a link. If you didn't sign up, you can still sign today by getting a hold of Nachum at jewishdestiny.com. If you don't do any of that and you show up, we will not throw you out.